The dining table was already crowded when we arrived. Plates overlapped. Chairs were pulled too close together. The smell of overcooked food mixed with forced cheerfulness, the kind that only exists when family pretends everything is fine. I squeezed my son's hand gently as we walked in. He was 10, too young to understand how easily words could bruise, old enough to remember them forever. "Sit here," my mother said, pointing to the far end of the table. Not beside her, not near my sister. Slightly away, where we usually ended up. My son didn't complain. He never did. He sat down quietly, his feet swinging above the floor, eyes scanning the room with the same curiosity he carried everywhere. He loved observing people, loved understanding how things worked. Earlier that day, he told me, softly, almost shyly, that he wanted to be a manager one day. Not because of money, because he liked organizing, helping, making things run better. I'd smiled and told him that was a good dream. Dinner began with harmless chatter. Work complaints, someone's neighbor, a joke my father repeated twice because he liked hearing people laugh at it. My sister sat across from us. Perfect posture, perfect smile, the kind that sharpened instead of softened when she spoke. "So," she said suddenly, tilting her head toward my son, "what does he want to be when he grows up?" The table quieted just a little. My son straightened, encouraged by the attention. "I want to be a manager," he said. "Like someone who helps people do their jobs better." There it was. Pride flickered across his face, brief, hopeful, unguarded. My sister smiled wider. Then she laughed. Not loudly, casually. "Oh, honey," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "Just don't expect much. Your son is more mop than manager." The words landed gently. That's what made them cruel. A couple of people chuckled. Someone snorted into their drink. My father looked down at his plate. My mother adjusted her napkin like she hadn't heard anything unusual. My son didn't cry. He just stopped swinging his legs. His shoulders dropped, not dramatically, just enough for me to notice. I watched his eyes flicker from face to face, searching. For disagreement. For correction. For someone to say, "That's not true." No one did. I felt something tighten in my chest. "Eat your food," my sister added lightly, already turning back to her plate. Dreams are cute at that age. I reached for my son's hand under the table. It was cold. He squeezed back, once, and then pulled away, focusing intensely on his plate as if it suddenly required all his attention. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't stand up. I looked around the table and realized something with devastating clarity. They weren't laughing because they agreed. They were laughing because it was easier than speaking up. And my child had just learned that lesson the hard way. I took a slow breath. This wasn't about careers. This wasn't about jokes. This was about how easily my son had been reduced in a room full of people who claimed to love him, and how comfortable they were letting it happen. I set my fork down. "Actually," I said calmly, breaking the fragile hum of conversation, "he's exactly who he needs to be." My sister raised an eyebrow. "Relax. It was a joke." I met her gaze. "No," I said. "It was a measurement." The table went quiet, and in that silence, I realized something irreversible had already happened. This dinner wasn't going to end the way they expected. We didn't leave immediately. That might have been my first mistake. I told myself I didn't want to create a scene, that staying calm was better, that my son didn't need to see me react. But children don't need raised voices to understand tension. They feel it in the pauses, in the way adults suddenly speak softer, in the way laughter doesn't quite return to the room. My son barely touched his food. He kept his head down, moving pieces of rice around his plate like he was organizing something invisible, as if order could be restored if he tried hard enough. I watched him from the corner of my eye, my chest aching. This wasn't the first time my family had crossed a line. It was just the first time they'd done it so clearly to my child. Growing up, I'd been the one expected to understand jokes that weren't funny, to swallow comments disguised as honesty, to be the bigger person when someone else was careless. My sister had always been allowed sharpness. "It's just how she talks," my parents would say. "She doesn't mean harm." Meaning had never mattered. Impact had. I excused us early. My mother protested lightly. My father nodded without meeting my eyes. My sister didn't look up at all. In the car, my son was silent. The streetlights passed in slow rhythm, illuminating his face in fragments. He stared out the window, jaw tight, expression thoughtful in a way that didn't belong on a 10-year-old. After a few minutes, he spoke. "Mom." "Yes, baby." "Am I bad at things?" The question hit me harder than the insult itself. "No," I said immediately. "Why would you think that?" He shrugged. "Auntie said I shouldn't expect much." I pulled the car over. Right there, on a quiet street, I turned to face him fully. "You listen to me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "What she said wasn't about you. It was about her." He frowned. But everyone laughed. I didn't correct him. They didn't know how to respond. I said carefully. "That doesn't make her right." He nodded slowly, absorbing this. "Do you think I could still be a manager?" he asked. I smiled, though my throat burned. "I think you could be anything," I said. "But more importantly, I think you're already kind. And that matters more." He looked down again, then back up. "Okay," he said softly. But something had changed. I could see it in the way he hugged his backpack closer when we got home, in how he avoided his mirror when brushing his teeth. Words don't disappear. They settle. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat alone on the couch, replaying the dinner in my mind. Not just the comment, the laughter, the silence, the way no one corrected her. I realized I had mistaken familiarity for safety. I had brought my son into a space where love was conditional, and I told myself it was normal. It wasn't, and I wouldn't do it again. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was angry, because I was alert. Parenthood changes the way fear works. It stops being about what happens to you and starts being about what gets planted in someone else. The next morning, my son woke up earlier than usual. He dressed carefully, slower than normal, like he was measuring himself against something invisible. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, pretending not to notice. After he left for school, I made the call. My sister answered on the third ring. "Hey," she said lightly. "What's up?" "What you said last night," I replied. "About my son." She laughed. "Oh my God, you're still on that?" "Yes." A pause. "You're being sensitive," she said. "It was a joke." "It wasn't funny to him," I said. "That's not my responsibility," she replied. "Kids need thick skin." I inhaled slowly. "No," I said. "Adults need restraint." Her tone sharpened. "So now I can't say anything without you policing me?" "You can say whatever you want," I replied. "Just not about my child." Silence. Then she scoffed. "You're overreacting. Everyone knows he's not exactly ambitious." I felt something go cold inside me. "We're done," I said calmly. "With what?" she asked. "With pretending this is harmless." I hung up before she could respond. The backlash came quickly. My mother called that afternoon. "You embarrassed your sister," she said. "She embarrassed my son," I replied. She was joking. She was measuring his worth. My father sent a text instead of calling. "You should apologize and move on." Families tease. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a decision. We wouldn't be attending Sunday dinners anymore. Not temporarily. Not as punishment. As protection. When I told my son, he looked relieved and guilty. "Is it because of me?" he asked. "No," I said firmly. "It's because of me. Because I should have spoken sooner. Because I should have noticed patterns instead of moments." The family didn't take it well. Messages arrived daily. "You're isolating him. You're teaching him to be weak. You're tearing the family apart." I read them without replying. Boundaries feel like attacks to people who benefit from you having none. Weeks passed. My son started laughing more again. Talking about school. About ideas. About things he wanted to try. One evening, he told me he'd organized his classroom group project because someone had to make sure everyone felt included. I smiled. He didn't need defending from the world. He needed defending from people who confused cruelty with honesty. And I would never fail him again. The story they told about me changed quickly. At first, I was hurt. Then I was difficult. Eventually, I became unstable. I didn't hear it directly. These things never travel straight. They arrive through softened versions, filtered by concern, coated in politeness. My aunt called one afternoon, her voice careful, like she was stepping around something fragile. "Your mother's worried," she said. "She says you've been distant lately." "I've been quiet," I replied. There's a difference. Well, people are saying you're keeping your son away out of spite. I closed my eyes. Spite was such a convenient word. It erased context. It painted intention where there was only protection. I'm keeping my son away from disrespect, I said calmly. There was a pause. But he needs family. So do I replied. And I didn't have it at that table. The calls continued. Each one followed the same pattern. Concern, minimization, guilt. You're letting one comment ruin everything. Your sister didn't mean it like that. Kids forget things faster than adults. I wondered if any of them remembered being 10. If they remembered how words don't disappear just because adults decide they should. My mother showed up at my door one evening without calling first. She stood there, arms folded, eyes scanning my face like she was looking for proof of imbalance. You're overprotecting him, she said, stepping inside. I'm parenting, I replied. You're projecting your own issues, she continued. This isn't about him. It's about you. I didn't raise my voice. It became about him when he stopped believing in himself, I said. She shook her head. You're teaching him to be fragile. No, I said quietly. I'm teaching him that cruelty doesn't deserve access. She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. You're punishing the whole family, she said. I finally understood something then. They didn't miss my presence. They missed my compliance. I had always been the one who smoothed things over, who translated sharpness into kindness, who made excuses, so no one else had to feel uncomfortable. Without me, the system was exposed. And systems don't like exposure. That night, my sister sent a long message. Not an apology, an explanation. She talked about stress, about how she'd worked hard for everything she had, about how reality checks were important. I was just being honest, she wrote. The world won't coddle him. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. The world didn't insult him. You did. Her response came immediately. You've always been dramatic. This is why people walk on eggshells around you. I set the phone down. Gaslighting only works when you doubt your memory. I didn't. The manipulation escalated after that. Family group chats filled with photos of gatherings we weren't invited to. Captions about togetherness. Subtle reminders of what we were missing. My son noticed. Did I do something wrong? He asked one night. I knelt in front of him, heart breaking all over again. No, I said firmly. You did something right. You spoke your dream out loud. He smiled weakly. Next time, he said. I'll keep it to myself. That sentence decided everything. I emailed my parents the next morning. It wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. I explained that until my son received a sincere apology, and until mocking children was no longer normalized, we would be stepping back indefinitely. No conditions. No timeline. No negotiation. The response was swift. My father accused me of creating division. My mother accused me of being unforgiving. My sister accused me of weaponizing motherhood. I read every word. And then I did something I'd never done before. I didn't reply. I blocked the group chat. I muted the noise. And in that quiet, something unexpected happened. Peace. Not relief. Peace. And how they were before had never worked for me. Or for my son. Days passed, then weeks. The volume dropped. Messages became shorter. Eventually, they stopped altogether. That's when the real consequences began. My parents had relied on me more than they admitted. I was the one who remembered birthdays, organized gatherings, handled emotional repairs after arguments. Without me, things didn't fall apart, but they didn't run smoothly either. I heard through others that dinners had become tense. That my sister snapped more easily now that no one softened her edges. That my mother complained about how everyone was so sensitive lately. I wasn't there to translate anymore. And that absence changed the balance. At home, something else was happening. My son was slowly unfolding again. It didn't happen all at once. Healing never does. It arrived in small, ordinary moments, the kind you almost miss if you're not paying attention. He started talking more at dinner. About school. About ideas. About things that frustrated him. Things he wanted to fix. He asked questions without immediately apologizing for them. One evening, while we were doing homework, he paused and said, "You know, I still think being a manager is cool." I looked up from the sink. "Yeah," I asked casually, though my chest tightened. Yeah, he said, shrugging. Someone has to make sure everyone's okay. I smiled. Not because he was confident again, but because he was kind without shrinking. That mattered more than anything. There were moments I doubted myself. Late nights when exhaustion settled in, and I wondered if cutting off family, real family, had been too extreme. If I deprived my son of something important, if someday he'd resent me for it, then I'd remember his voice in the car. Am I bad at things? And the doubt would disappear. One afternoon, my mother called after weeks of silence. Her voice sounded tired. We didn't realize how serious this was for you, she said. I tried to tell you, I replied gently. You didn't give us time, she said. I gave you years, I answered. She didn't argue. I think your sister feels attacked, she added. I think my son felt humiliated, I replied. Another pause. What would it take for you to come back? She asked. I thought carefully before answering. It would take acknowledgement, I said. And accountability. From her. That's hard for her, my mother said quietly. I know, I replied. But it's not harder than being 10 and laughed at. The line went quiet. When we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt grounded. Some bridges don't collapse. They're simply revealed as unsafe. My sister never apologized. Not properly. She sent a message weeks later, short, clipped, defensive. I'm sorry if he took it the wrong way. I didn't respond. Apologies that protect the speaker more than the hurt don't heal anything. As months passed, we built new rituals. Movie nights, Sunday pancakes, long walks where my son talked freely about his thoughts, his fears, his plans. He began mentoring a younger student at school who struggled with reading. Came home excited, explaining how he'd helped organize the kids' notes. I think I'm good at helping people, he said proudly. I hugged him tightly. You are, I whispered. I realized then that protecting him hadn't made him fragile. It had made him safe, and safety allows growth. My family still exists. We're just no longer at the center of it. And for the first time in my life, that doesn't feel like loss. It feels like alignment. Time doesn't fix things. It reveals them. As months passed, the sharpness of that dinner night dulled, not because it mattered less, but because it no longer sat at the center of my life. It became a marker instead of a wound, a point where everything quietly changed direction. My family adjusted in their own way. I heard through relatives that gatherings continued, birthdays were celebrated, holidays passed, photos were taken, smiles were shared, life moved on. Without us. And that truth settled differently than I expected. It didn't feel like rejection. It felt like confirmation. I hadn't been missed as a person. I'd been missed as a role. The fixer. The smoother. The one who absorbed discomfort, so others didn't have to. Without me, conversations ended earlier. Conflicts lingered longer. My sister's sharpness no longer had a buffer. My mother had to confront silence instead of explanations. I didn't step back in to help. Not out of bitterness. Out of clarity. At home, life became quieter but fuller. My son began sleeping better, laughing louder, taking up space without scanning faces for approval. He spoke about school with excitement again. About ideas. About problems he wanted to solve. One evening, while we were cleaning up after dinner, he looked at me and said, "Mom, I think being kind is actually kind of brave." I froze. "Why do you think that?" I asked. "Because it's easier to make fun of people," he said. "But helping them is harder." I swallowed hard. That was the moment I knew I'd made the right decision. Not because I'd protected him from pain forever, that's impossible. But because I'd shown him that pain doesn't get the final word. I ran into my sister once, months later, at a family event we both happened to attend for unrelated reasons. We exchanged polite nods. Nothing more. She looked the same. Confident. Polished. Untouched. I realized something surprising then. I didn't need her apology anymore. I'd been waiting for it once, thinking it would restore balance, validate my choice, justify the distance. But distance had already done that. I didn't carry anger toward her. I carried boundaries. And boundaries don't require agreement. My parents tried, occasionally, to reconnect. Invitations came with softened language, careful phrasing, an unspoken hope that time had smoothed things enough to return to how they were. But how they were was no longer an option. When I did see them, it was brief, controlled, on neutral ground. My son stayed close to me, not out of fear, but comfort. My father once said quietly, "He's grown." "Yes," I replied. "He has." He didn't comment further. Maybe he remembered the dinner. Maybe he didn't. Either way, I stopped needing him to understand. Understanding isn't required for respect. And respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you model. I taught my son something that year without ever saying it directly. I taught him that love doesn't humiliate. That family isn't defined by blood, but by safety. That dreams deserve protection, especially when they're small and still forming. I taught him that walking away isn't weakness when staying means shrinking. And in doing so, I learned it too. The words my sister spoke that night still exist. They always will. But they no longer echo. They sit where they belong, in the past, stripped of power. My son still wants to be a manager. But now he says it differently. With confidence. With clarity. Without apology. And when I watch him speak about his future, I don't see fragility. I see resilience that didn't come from being toughened by cruelty, but from being protected by love. I didn't raise my voice that night. I didn't flip the table. I didn't demand silence. I chose distance. And that choice changed everything. Because sometimes the strongest thing a mother can do isn't to fight. It's to leave.